we go, here we go, here we go. All right, here we are. All right, everybody, welcome along. Get the Benny up in just a second here. Here we go.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his
All
music.
right. Now I can finish making my Manhattan. You guys got to do something to keep warm. Hey, Chris, Octavio, Pat, Gene, and Eric. And I do have to keep warm tonight. Hey, Hispanic over on YouTube. Hey, Mona, Marie, Jim, and Mary. I'm just going to get some wood in here. Kindling.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable, in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
There we go. And I need to do something to keep warm on account of there is no heat in my building tonight. Furnace guy said they'll be here within an hour, but they were supposed to be here 2 hours ago at the latest. So it is chilly here in West Rogers Park tonight, or north, south, west, ridge, east. Hey, Mom. Hey, Hero Maniacs over on YouTube. Hey, Lorena. Hey, all. No one come others. Hey, Susan. Yeah, it's chilly in here, but I got sweaters. Hey, Kathleen in the whole euphonium section. Yeah, not a good day to be without heat. I'm getting by. I made a great pot roast, as I said I was going to. Hey, Priya. I see a Priya here. Where's Miles? Miles too cold to come out? Oh, here he is. I asked, where's Miles? And, well, here he is. Hey, Heather. Yeah, Eileen. Hey, Miles. We're using the new laptop today because Miles broke the old one. But I guess it was time. I think it was about 4 years old. It was pretty old for a laptop. Still running just fine. I could have got a couple more years out of that thing. Oh, Miles. Looking kind of scraggly. Chicago Mysteries was just done. Miles. He's been walking around seeming very contrite the last couple of days. I'm making a point of petting him more. As you know, we all know he didn't mean to break the laptop. He knocked a very heavy thing onto it. A very heavy framed autograph picture of Sally Rand the fan dancer. Very mysterious Chicago way to lose your laptop. Hey, Julius. Night-night, Julius. So, well, at least it's Cyber Monday. I'll be able to get probably a cool deal. No. The gift card you could get with selected Apple purchases did not apply to new laptops other than the MacBook Air. I don't know why. But at least by plugging the old laptop into this TV, I was able to use that as a monitor and salvage what was on it. I got a really cool and on-theme Find a Grave Friday set up for tomorrow. And next week, once again, I will be in Oklahoma doing research. So I'll probably try to pop on for lunches or something. Hey, happy birthday, Ryan, over on YouTube. This needs a little more bourbon. Isn't that what they all say? That guy's got to do something to keep warm. Hey, Dad. And my dad could probably have fixed the furnace by now. We've had more trouble with this thing. Hey, Valerie, I'm feeling alright other than chilly. Miles, be careful, please. Yeah, it's the more... You shouldn't be sitting on it like that. Hey, Lehman. Hey, Heather. Greeting Laura in Colorado. Okay, Miles, time to get down, okay? Can you do it? Can you make it? Oh, they knocked down the all in the head guy. That's okay. He's gonna knock him down. Alright. First hot chocolate of the season. That's kind of late, isn't it, Heather? I guess I haven't had mine yet. Hey, Dan Silvestri. And every night, tell the stars above you. Hey, Patty's out there. All right. I'll tell you, tomorrow is a longer commute than I normally do for Find a Grave Friday. It's one that we haven't used too much. I think only 2 or 3 times. But it is a cool one. And since I'll be gone for a few days, I feel like I owe you guys a good one. Sherry, I did that the other day. I made leftover turkey and noodles. With the Reams frozen egg noodles. Yeah, Frosty and Law and Order, I can see that. Or Frosty in like one of those cryptid hunter shows. I once wrote like a short story about kids investigating the rumor that a snowman was brought to life in the town square one time. And of course now there's only this murky photo. It's called the Frosty Files. The publishers didn't want it. I was kind of surprised. I thought it was fun.
Jenny Walk, Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
There's really, unless you throw it change before I melt away to before it's Christmas Day, it's not necessarily a Christmas song, Frosty the Snowman. It's just a winter necromancy song. It's a winter song about a snow golem. They wrote Ahmet on his head. He began to dance around. Welcome along, everybody. We'll get started in a couple of minutes here. My voice is still not fully recovered from walking pneumonia, but it's possibly affected by the fact that it's, like, chilly in here anyway. This isn't even my warmest sweater. I'll have to change into something soon. But it's a cool one. It's one of my favorites. Richard's Fabulous Finds, best menswear shop in Chicago. Possibly the best vintage menswear shop there is. People told me about all the great vintage shops in Edinburgh, but they didn't have a lot of men's stuff. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? You know where I fall on that one? I don't give a damn. I genuinely do not care whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Thanks, Karen. Welcome, everybody. We're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune after this. Going to be live in the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. Just around the bend and down the block from these buildings back behind me in the picture. Yippee-ki-yay. Tavio, that was my fraternity.
And they all loved it. They all loved those bastards when they played.
Well, for a while I was in Yippee-ki-yay, then I moved to Chico Groucho Harpo. Hey, Grandma Bell. Hey, Janice, we're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune, then we will get started properly here on Mysterious Chicago. Happy holidays, Alf in Milwaukee. Yeah, I got a fireplace. It's not real or working or anything, but it's there. I cultivate a cozy and warm atmosphere in here. And for what? When Alan Rickman comes up in the chat, I always want to tell the story the day I saw him coming out of a bookstore on Milwaukee Avenue. And he gave my brother and I this look like, for the love of God, don't come up and start talking to me. And we did not. And when that dude glared at you, you stay glared at. Been like 15, 20 years, I'm still glared at. Also, like, if you look up the old BBC, when they did every Shakespeare thing in the late 70s, early 80s, there's a Romeo and Juliet where he plays Tybalt. Very interesting to watch now. Like, peace, I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee. Potter!
Music by Benny Goodman is being
All right.
from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman.
That's Benny wrapping it up, so we are going to move on ourselves a little bit here. All right, everybody, I think it is time. It's time. All right, everybody, welcome along to Mysterious Chicago. Today is one of our tours that does not involve a whole lot of murders, old-timey serial killers, though if you like those, you will definitely want to be on the serial killer tour of the Patreon tomorrow. I got Henry Meyer's pardon file. There's some really interesting stuff in there. All right, everybody, welcome along. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Author of such books as Mysterious Chicago, the book, The Smart Aleck's Guide to American History, Murder Maps USA from Thames and Hudson, and Graceland Cemetery Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. So, I'm also on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. I'm not an academic, but I play one on TV, which is apparently is good enough for some archives. Once again, there will not be a show next week because I'll just be flying back from Oklahoma. I'll be in some archives all next week, digging through old notebooks and listening to session tapes. It's going to be so awesome. But all right, so today we're going to be talking about Art Deco architecture, which is one of my favorite styles. Is the style that I look at and just immediately think city. Now, really, when I was a kid, my concept of big city architecture was a little bit more modernism, plain black boxes. It was when I was a little kid, we had one skyscraper in Des Moines, and it was the Rouen building, which was a plain black rectangle. When I think big city, that's still kind of what I think. But really, when I think about like a city in the movies, I think about Art Deco. Now, Art Deco is a whole style that is dictated, like a lot of things, is dictated not just by fashions, but also by the environment. There was a new rule in New York. In 1916, the Equity Building was built right across the street from Trinity Church by Bruce Graham of Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White, the Chicago firm. And people were so concerned that it was going to block out the sun that a new law was made saying that buildings had to get narrower as they got taller. But also, this had the kind of an optical illusion effect. As they got narrower, that kind of created the illusion that they were taller and taller. This overlaps with the time when they had just found new ways to make buildings taller and taller, much taller than they had ever been before. You know, in the 1890s, 20 stories was higher than most people could fathom. Then all of a sudden, in the 1920s and 30s, we were going up 100 stories high. So this law was also on the books in Chicago, but just briefly. Now, this is actually some of the zoning code about it right here, but not too many buildings would have actually been affected by this in Chicago. Shortly after it came out, the Great Depression hit, and people stopped building buildings that high for a while. So let's just take a look. So this is a style of architecture known as Beaux-Arts. This is that fancy style that you see quite a bit. That was supplanted in Chicago, at least, by the commercial style, now known as the Chicago School, which we see here by Hullibert and Roche's building, the Marquette building. And also you had guys like Frank Lloyd Wright doing the Prairie School style, which was also called the Chicago School at the time, but some people called it Chicago School Suburban, in parentheses. That emphasized the horizontal much more than the vertical. But other people were going for the vertical, the Equity Building just mentioned here in New York, where it almost seems like it's really emphasizing the vertical nature of it, these straight, clean lines. Now, this is a little bit before Art Deco, but this inspired the shape that would eventually become synonymous with Art Deco, this kind of ziggurat style. So the most famous examples of Art Deco are generally in New York, such as the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building. Now, the Chrysler Building is for Chrysler, the cars. Those top things up there, those are supposed to look like tires stacked together. It's an Art Deco representation of a bunch of tires. On the New York tour guide exam, one of the questions is, what is the best example of Art Deco architecture in Chicago, and in New York? And I don't know, I would say the General Electric Building, but they want you to say the Chrysler Building. Frankly, that's an opinion piece, but when you take a test, you got to just take the test. Now, really, the easiest way to imagine Art Deco with the clean lines and its streamlined verticality that's Jazz Age architecture is really from some stuff that started showing up a few years after Art Deco's heyday in the 1920s and 30s. Buildings like the Daily Planet, as seen here in the 1940s version of Superman. Now, the Daily Planet started showing up in Superman in around the same time as the cartoon in 1942. This is the first example of it in the press. It is sometimes said to be based on the Paramount Building in New York, which is kind of straddles a line between Beaux-Arts, beautiful art, and Art Deco. But back in Chicago, we had this whole magazine called The Chicagoan in the 1920s and 30s, which really pushed that new modern style. It was not called Art Deco yet. It wasn't really referred to as Art Deco until the 1960s. It's never the generation of architects doing the architecture who notice what the style is. It comes later. They name it decades after the fact. But you see this trend with the very clean lines, with streamlined verticality, with bright colors, with images of very tall people. You see this a lot in Art Deco buildings. The very tall people emphasize the height of the building. And at Shoreline Sightseeing, we were supposed to say that it reflects the soaring optimism of the 1920s. But that's another thing that they decided in hindsight was a thing. Nobody in the 1920s was full of soaring optimism. It was bitter disillusion from the end of World War I. But also, you had the Prohibition going on, which led like Crush to crush orange soda to send to Crush Dry, which was kind of a substitute for alcohol because it was like orange soda, only, a little bit yucky. But this is an ad from the pages of the Chicagoan. Now, going into the roots of Art Deco in Chicago, we got to start really with the Chicago Tribune building, which is absolutely not Art Deco. This is very much Gothic revival from 1924 by Howells and Hood, but there was a contest, a hugely publicized contest to design the new Chicago Tribune building in the early 1920s. And when this one was built, a lot of people thought, so that's the winner? You're going for like old Gothic cathedral style? Come on, man, it's the 20s. Get with it. Let's roar. So the second place design was a Finnish architect by the name of Ailil Saarinen. I'm never going to pronounce that correctly as long as I live. But that became the basis of Halliburton Roots 333 North Michigan. So what you see here is it gets narrower as it gets taller. It's got a lot of clean lines. It almost has this cash register look to it that they kind of phased out. But that was generally the basis for Halliburton Roots 333 North Michigan across the river from the Chicago Tribune building. See here, you can see it over there on the left, which gives you some idea. And Howells and Hood, almost contritely, soon got the commission to do a building called the American Radiator Building in New York that looks like this. This overlooks Bryant Park. It's one of my favorite buildings. Georgia O'Keeffe did a painting of it. It's a gorgeous black and gold building, very much in the Art Deco style, and ended up inspiring a Chicago building by Burnham and Burnham, the Burnham brothers, which you can see in the background there behind 333 Michigan. You can see the Carbide and Carbon building, this green and gold one of the finest examples of Art Deco in Chicago. Let's take a look at this building. Nice and green, too. You just don't see green buildings very often. Like green certified buildings, sure. But this is a building that is actually dark green in color. Let's take a look at it from the top. This is from the top of the Virgin Hotel. There it is, that gorgeous green and gold. Love this. Carbide and Carbon was a gas company, eventually became a part of People's Gas. One of the founders was a guy named Cornelius Billings, shown here promoting a wholesome trotting race, as he often did. Had huge mansions up in New York, now he's at Graceland Cemetery. Now, there's an outstanding legend about the Carbide and Carbon building saying that the Burnham brothers wanted it to look like an old champagne bottle. Now, it's kind of an Art Deco version of a champagne bottle with the green glass and the gold on the top. This being 1930, when it was Prohibition going on, that would have been kind of amusingly bold. I always thought that was an urban legend until I mentioned it once on one of these tours, and somebody sent me an excerpt of Burnham Jr.'s diary. And it mentions here specifically they wanted to look like the American Radiator Company building in New York City, black trimmed with gold, but he wants a black-green like the color of an old champagne bottle. So there it is, right there. Aha! I love it when these things actually turn out to be true. So there it is, the champagne bottle itself. Let's take a look at it at night, too. Now, down below, you can also see a lot of Art Deco touches and things like the light fixtures down there. And also the awning. Look at this. This is a style you see a lot, that kind of a Great Gatsby sort of style. I need to reread Gatsby. It's been a minute. But it figures in a little bit to Graceland Cemetery Volume 2, which I'm working on this afternoon. But also we've got the entrance there, the opening windows, these very much Art Deco style lamps, and the Art Deco look of the CC for Carbide and Carbon, even though it hasn't actually been occupied by Carbon and Carbon in a very long time. Now, one building from that era that is still operating in its original function. From 1930, by Halliburton and Root, the rock stars of Art Deco in Chicago, the Chicago Board of Trade building. This is maybe my favorite building in Chicago, especially at night when they get it lit up like this and it gets this cool Bruce Wayne vibe to it. In fact, it was the Wayne headquarters in Batman Begins. Here it is as it appeared on the cover of the Chicagoan. We'll fit it in right where it goes here. And here it is by day. It's still cool by day, but not quite as impressive, honestly. But yeah, look at it at night. I can never get enough of that. On top, of course, is a real Art Deco touch, which is a statue of the Roman goddess Ceres, the goddess of grains and agriculture, it being the Board of Trade. So this was sculpted by a guy named John Story. And there is an outstanding legend that it didn't have a face because he thought, well, they're never going to build another building as tall as this one. And it was the tallest building in Chicago for a good, until well after the Great Depression, for a good 25 years. But Ceres doesn't have a face really, partly because it is true that not many people get a good enough view of it, even now, that they'd really know if it had facial expressions. And as high up as it is, for most people, if it did, it would just look a little bit busy up there. But really, it's more just that it's an Art Deco thing. Nice and smooth, nice and clean lines was what it was all about. You can also see that it's kind of an hourglass shape, which helps make it look taller and taller. You see this reflected in, say, the Oscar, which is from the same era and also does not have a face. And down at the bottom, there are these relief sculptures by a guy by the name of Alvin Meyer, showing old-timey traders, one of whom is a Native American and the other of whom appears on the back of Led Zeppelin 4. Also, I believe this might be where I got this picture of very tall people on a gold elevator. But I don't know. Once again, tall people are just something we run into a lot in Art Deco. A couple of the taller ones, way up at the top end of Lakeshore Drive. As it bends around, part of Loyola University today, originally Mundelein, Fisher and McCarthy's building for the old Mundelein College. Move in closer here with these two statues that look very, very, very tall. It starts here and they go all the way down. The columns, the robes kind of become the columns. It's a very cool setup. And of course, the windows around it, that very much poster for the Great Gatsby movie style that we associate, the geometric patterns and art that we associate with Art Deco. Let's move up just a bit. And behold the Palmolive Building. This is a Halliburton root job from 1929. This is the one with the beacon here on top, in between the Drake Hotel and the John Hancock Building. And it lines up so well with the Drake that for the longest time driving down Lakeshore Drive, I thought this was just a part of the Drake Hotel. The tower was actually attached. But no, it is its own building on the other side of it, once again getting narrower as it gets taller, and has been inspiring artists and architects for a very long time back. There's a fantastic picture of it from back when there wasn't much else on the Magnificent Mile. Just the water tower and then nothing all the way to the Palmolive Building. On the top there, you can see what is called the Lindbergh Beacon. This was a massive beacon up on the top that is still up there now, but it doesn't spin around like it used to. It used to spin around and around and around, but now it would go right into people's windows, so it only goes out over the lake now. There were all these stories that you could, go all the way to Michigan in an airplane and read by the light of the Lindbergh Beacon. You can see it glowing here in the 1960s when it became the Playboy Building for a while. Well, speaking of buildings that had a big beacon on top, this is the Sal Wacker Building by Halliburton Root 1930. They were really busy around then. They were doing the Board of Trade building in 1930. They were doing this in 1930. They did the Palmolive Building the year before. Halliburton Root were... Mr. Halliburton's dad was in Halliburton Roche that did the Marquette Building. Mr. Root's dad was in Burnham and Root, but these two sons of Chicago architecture dynasties became really the rock stars of the Art Deco age. Here we'll get another shot of this building at night. On the ghost tours, we used to call this the Devil's Armchair. I don't remember why, other than the flagpole down there that you would sit on. So here's a cool shot of it along with these other buildings, the 111 building and 77 Wacker, the United Building, 1990 to Stefano and Partners. But here is an early shot of it when it too had a massive beacon up on the top. It was called the Sun Flash Beacon. Here's a cool shot where in the background you can see the Palmolive Building, both of the two beacons, right there at the same time. back when there wasn't much between these two. But the sun flash was a beacon that was really just simple lights that were really amplified by the fancy use of mirrors. Now, having bold lighting schemes on top of buildings was a real feature of Art Deco. You saw at the Board of Trade building, it was all lit up in a very dramatic lighting scheme. The technology to do that was only brand new at the time that these buildings were built. But this is a building about a man-made star. There was a story about a pilot took off from Toledo, saw this weird light, and followed it all the way to Chicago. And it turned out to be the sun flash beacon. Problem was it didn't last too long. For one thing, bats and birds flew right into the thing all the time. And speaking of stories, the building itself, back in 1932, after Capone went to prison, the Board of Trade, the LaSalle Wacker building briefly became the home of the Capone gang under the leadership of Frank the Enforcer Nitti, who was not quite as good as hiding from the cops as Capone was. The police rushed in there and shot him pretty good, but he was saved by the fact that he had been on an empty stomach. That was apparently made it easier to operate. There were a lot of weird little superstitions about shootings back then, like never go to a raid on an empty stomach, on a full stomach. And also there were stories about them like rubbing garlic over the tip of the bullets because they thought that would make them deadlier. Really, it just made it smell like you were at the Olive Garden. Well, speaking of restaurants, in the 1970s, 1960s, the LaSalle Wacker building was the home of Prince Castle Sales, operated by a guy by the name of Ray Kroc, who was in the business of selling things like multi-mixers, these machines that could make 8 milkshakes at once. A couple of brothers out in California called the McDonald brothers ordered like 7 of them, and he had to go out there for himself to see what kind of business could keep several of these things running at the same time, and ended up buying them out. He was actually sitting in his office at the LaSalle Wacker building when the McDonald brothers called and said, "Okay, we've got our price. If you want to buy us out, it'll be $2.5 million. It would be enough for $1 million each of the brothers after taxes. They also wanted like 1% of sales, which was in the contract, but Roy ended up screwing him out of it. In any case, when they asked him for $2.5 million, he dropped the phone and said, "Did you hear that? That's the sound of me jumping out of the LaSalle Wacker building." It's an excellent movie called The Founder with Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton in one of his best roles. That, Batman, and Night Shift. Right across the way from that is the Merchandise Mart by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White in 1929. Let's take a look at this when they got it all lit up now. It's kind of a modern version of the dramatic lighting schemes. You can see like the edges of it are lit up. But now they've added art on the mart, which is ingeniously set up so it never shines the light into the windows. Yeah, I just caught Night Shift on Tubi. Now, we used to have, just up the road from this was the Clark Theater that showed like weird double bills every night, like Citizen Kane paired with Dracula meets Billy the Kid. You can recreate that on Tubi very well. And pair up Night Shift with the 1930s Errol Flynn Robin Hood. But now there's another one that you have to go up an elevator to see properly. The view of it is kind of blocked. Let's go, let's check it out. The view of it's kind of blocked. You can see it off in the distance here from the street level. But off in the distance, one of the most perfect buildings, Art Deco style in Chicago, very similar to the Paramount building in New York, really, is the Trustee System Services building by Theobald and Reed in 1930. And the best way to get a really good look at it, you can see the view is kind of blocked by the L tracks, but there's a parking garage across the street. Take the elevator up to the top, and you get almost a perfect view of an Art Deco building up here. I love this. Move in a little bit. This is at 201 North Wells. It was advertised as having a great skyline restaurant on the inside, which they now assume was a speakeasy, just because they do. Well, we'll move in a little bit here. You can see this symbol of commerce, the caduceus, two serpents wrapped around a staff, which is a symbol of commerce. You see it a lot on graves, but it's often used for medical. It's supposed to be two snakes are commerce, one snake is medical, but we don't really adhere to that very often in the States. But down to the entryway of Trustee System Services, we've got all these things about like how credit moves the world and how the thrifty man prospers and the spendthrift goes away. Like credit moves the modern business world. Or life punishes the thriftless. See, here's this thriftless guy looking there like Maynard G. Krebs. Sorry, I'm too young for that reference. But they've also got this magnificent grill work here on the inside. And incidentally, Trustee System Services went out of business, apparently not taking their own financial advice all that well, just a little while after the building was completed. But a cool thing about this grill work is when the train goes by outside, it almost looks like it's animated. Check this out. But we'll move on with these symbols of industry. You do see that quite a bit in 1930s Art Deco style buildings. For one thing, out in Chicago Heights is Bloom High School, which is very Art Deco itself. Look at this. Such a cool look for a high school, honestly. 100% Art Deco with its geometric art, streamlined verticality, even in a horizontal building. Cool thing on the inside is they've got these WPA murals on the inside. These are pieces of history. Now, I hope they're able to keep them. I wouldn't blame them if they wanted to do something about them, because honestly, they do not reflect the student body there today in any way. There's one guy there who looks like he may not be white. But I hope they're able to save them, because they're absolutely magnificent. While we're at it, Kristen just showed me she's got a representation of this on her mantle. This is an old ComEd power station with this fantastic fresco called The Spirit of Electricity by Sylvia Shaw Judson, who perhaps is best known for that statue on the cover of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. But you can see here this, like the Incredible Hulk in a loincloth, holding up lightning bolts with an Art Deco city around him. This reminded me a lot of the General Electric building in New York, which is fantastic Art Deco to begin with, and has similarly a lot of like representations of lightning bolts with classical imagery, but all in that Art Deco style. Now, one building I'm just informed did not have landmark status is the Daily News building, another 1929 to 1930 building by Holabird and Root, which I have heard described as like an Art Deco sphinx. All right. On the inside, it's also got this fantastic Art Deco artwork, like a comedy and tragedy mask by Alvin Meyer, same guy who did the traders at the Chicago Board of Trade building. Let's just take a look at the plaza a bit. The plaza has representations about the history of print, this being Daily News. Over on Blue Sky, we've been talking about the Chicago Daily News model homes from the 1920s, which they said had been built for John Daily News and his sons Charles, Tom, and John Jr. John Daily News is a great name for an outlaw or a hard-boiled detective. John Daily News was sitting in his office, wondering where the next case was coming from. We've got images of, like Mr. Victor Lawson right there was the founder of the Chicago Daily News, or the editor for a while, Horace Greeley of the New York Tribune. Which is a lot better than the Herald, I'll tell you that. Kind of fun taking school groups to Herald Square and telling them all about the New York Herald. My God, that was an awful paper. But here's a nice, very vibey picture of this one. Now, on the inside, even the old directory where it used to tell you how to get around the building still has the Art Deco geometric artwork. Right across the river from it is the Chicago Civic Opera Building. 1929, Graham Anderson, Probst, and White. This is kind of a Beaux-Arts style building over an Art Deco frame. That same armchair look. There's a lot of legends about Mr. Imsel saying he would come back from the dead to sit in this armchair. Or that the armchair had its back to New York because he was turning his back on New York because they turned down his wife as an actress. Like he cared that much about his wife by 1929. You'll see this from the front over here. Mostly it's more in the Beaux-Arts style. You didn't want to be too modern when you were going for an opera. But you do see the columns here are Art Deco versions of Corinthian columns in a lot of ways. Now you can always remember there's Doric columns, there's Ionic columns, there's Corinthian columns, which I heard a teacher describe as the crazy pineapple kind. And I've never been able to think about it as anything else since then. But then you see these Art Deco style ones that take Corinthian and streamline them. Put a little more simple geometric art and verticality in. Also, I do want to point out the Civic Opera Building has the best message board sign game in the business. I usually think these message board signs are horribly cheesy. I know that comes from spending my teenage years in the South where every church has a message board sign with Bible messages and political messages more often than not. But this one, we're not on mute. Visit us online at lyricopera.org. I also like when they were doing Carmen, their message board saying said, bringing sexy back. They have fun with these. Now, similarly, you see some Art Deco style stuff for the columns at the old Chicago Post and later the Chicago Sun-Times building, a Halliburton root job from 1927. Stayed in that capacity until 1958. See, we got these columns here, but we'll move in on this a little bit. And you see, these are so streamlined they don't even have a capital. A column is supposed to have a base, a shaft, and a capital. But what do they have here? A base and a shaft. No capital. This is freaking me out, so we'll move on to 1 North LaSalle. Which was built over the site of the Tacoma building, where H.H. Holmes had to meet with his creditors. Inside there, we've still got some really cool elevators. Hello? I just heard my door open and somebody sneak in. That can't be good. All right, so 1 North LaSalle built in its place. You can really see it more from the side, how streamlined this verticality is. Just down the road, replacing Halliburton and Roche's home insurance building, the Field Building, by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White, which missed being the tallest building in Chicago for years by just a few feet by the Chicago Board of Trade building. That's how tall it was. Once again, you see these very straight lines going up and down, the straight up and down lines. Replacing the home insurance building. Up at the top is the Attic Club, designed by David Adler, protege of Howard Vander and Shaw. Here's the original drawing for it. Now, in 1943, this was mostly offices. One of my favorite stories is there was an insurance office that had a contest, like Grill Stravaganza's Trickling Propane. It was a contest where to see who could sell the most insurance in a month. A guy by the name of Walter Tarpey was ahead. But then, right at the last second, a guy named Walter Habenecht, a coworker, pulled ahead by selling himself an insurance policy. Isn't this just the look of a guy who would have cheated to the insurance at an insurance contest? So Walter Tarpey first tried to turn him into the FBI as a Russian spy, or a German spy. And when they decided, no, we don't have enough evidence for that, he just went and killed him. He had been just about to win, but Let this be a lesson. Don't cheat to win insurance contests. Let's move back a little bit. Another Halliburton Road building. Now the site of a hotel. But this was the old Chicago Motor Club. If you were a member of the Motor Club, you could stay at this building. Now, back in 1928, automobiles were still pretty much the latest thing. You can see some of the verticality of it here. On the inside, you get this geometric art right here, but it's starting to curve around a little bit. On the inside now, they've got it redone with this excellent motor car. But still, you can see a lot of the geometric art. Now, you see a lot of this. This is a little bit more representational. This has a lot of things like cars in it. But you also see that at the Deco Arts Building at the Ritz Garage by Louis Corman from the 1920s. Once again, when cars were still the newest and greatest thing. I was just looking up some socialites from the 1910s, found an article from Madam X that said motoring is the thing in Lake Forest. But this was an old car garage and decorated kind of like the Chrysler Building with a lot of images of tires and a lot of images of automobiles. Like here they're using tires as a very decorative element. And also these nice long roadsters, motor cars. I would totally trade Toad Hall for one of these. Once again, you see that kind of represented on the Chrysler Building as well. Kind of carries over from the Prairie School style where they liked the outside of a building to reflect what went on inside of the building. Now, another thing that was going on in the 1920s was Egyptian revival. People were very much into Egypt stuff after King Tut. So you've got Meyer and Cook's 1929 Laramie State Bank, which is built to look like an old Egyptian mausoleum or palace, one or the other, with a lot of things like scarabs all over it. And of course, this is also reflected back downtown. With Reby Moving and Storage, the Egyptian-style moving company on Clark Street. We'll move in here. We got whole pharaohs. Colorful representations with hieroglyphics that say something like, I will protect your furniture. And moving up, we've even got the caduceus with the two snakes around a winged saph. Just a couple of other examples around Chicago. We've got the Art Deco Grain Funeral Home on Irving Park, which used to be right next to the Orange Garden Chop Suey. They just got rid of this neon sign. I believe Billy Corgan bought it. It's in his tea shop in Highland Park now. And over in the West Loop, Richter Food Products, which adds a nice splash of color into its Art Deco stylings. I dig this. It's almost like scarabs in a way. And down in the Hyde Park era, you've got the First Church of Deliverance. Now these towers are a newer addition to it, but they make it not only Art Deco, but really, notice that they curve around a little bit. That's moving into the style that sort of supplanted Art Deco, which was streamlined modern, which is light Art Deco, but curvier. Now, Art Deco is a whole lot of straight lines, a whole lot of streamlined verticality. Once you add in a curve, it kind of becomes streamlined modern, like you see at the remains of the old Esquire Theater, where Star Wars premiered in Chicago in 1977. But looked like this back in the 1920s. Well, this is basically Art Deco, but curvier. Now, really, Art Deco had its height in the 1920s, continued throughout the 1930s, but in the 30s it started to be replaced with a more colorful and curvier streamlined modern, as we can see in this film footage of the 1933 World's Fair.
Here we are, folks, at Chicago's world-famed Century of Progress, the spectacular fair that was started by a beam of light from the Star Arcturus. No less than 22 millions of them came swarming into this colossal show to witness the brilliant handiwork of its modern, unparalleled ingenuity. They create a picture that enthralls the eye with their sweep and majesty, a gorgeous climax to this vista of blue-green lagoon. The hope of design made real. Mingling with the brisk tone of modern America, we find, too, the spice and flavor of the foreign. Once it was Ferris wheel, but today it's the towering sky ride that offers the major thrill of the fair. Traveling across the lagoon, one saw far below the fairgrounds in a molten glow of brilliance. Blues and reds and greens and yellows, all fused into a blazing kaleidoscope of color.
I love how
Here's
excited
King
this guy is
Kong
about
himself
colors.
and two of his gentle playmates entertaining the midway crowds. And now we come upon a most unique structure, the Travel and Transport Building, presenting a dominant phase of industry in its most commanding aspects, a triumph of architectural design and balance. And here is transportation in its most modern, thrilling expression.
Car grill.
The Temple of Champions, with its clean-cut lines and splashing fountains, mingling beauty with utility. In the shadow of this modern architecture, crowds come daily to see how cars are subjected to acid tests of endurance. This miniature track, with its 45-degree side banks and its saucer turns, is the proving ground of car performance.
Then after this, it goes on to make you just watch these a long, long time. But I think this really kind of looks forward to the next logical step was with the style we know as Space Age Gothic or Googie style. Now, my architecture tour groups of old people tend to love it when I talk about Space Age Gothic. They love that term. You see it in things like Norm's in Los Angeles or Mel's Diner. Stuff like that. But I love that style personally. But all right, everybody. Normally, this is the point where I plug upcoming tours. But again, next week I will be doing research down in Oklahoma, okay? So there won't be much coming up next week. We're just going to hang out. We will just hang out here like we always do. Thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago, coming to you on a brand new laptop because Miles broke the old one in a very chilly apartment. I heard some movement outside. I don't know if that's the furnace guys finally showing up, but we shall see. I will just put this thing up, and we will turn the Benny Goodman back on, hang out like we always do. My voice is still not fully recovered, is it? All right, thanks for those of you who have been kicking in donations. It helps keep these things running. And once again, it's a very good week to be on the Serial Killers tier of the Patreon. We got some really cool stuff on Henry Meyer. In fact, it was so cool that the New York State Archives waived the copying and scanning fees. Because, quote, this is the most interesting case I have seen all month. Thanks, Mary. And Cindy. Let's see if we got first. Nope, still cold. So 5 minutes ago, I got a text. They're working on it now. It's cold in my place. Thank you, Marita. Thanks especially to those of you kicking in donations down here. And that's what keeps me moving. Especially this being the winter time when I don't really have a lot of paid gigs. We're going to have a cool Find a Grave Friday tomorrow, one I'm pretty excited about. I started doing research for Graceland Cemetery Volume 2. It's like, wait, how did I miss... How did I miss that? So many things that I missed. But, you know, as they say, everybody's got a story, and I hope everybody has more than one. Some people will mention a couple of times and just tell different stories, like Jeremiah Price. Now, Kristen, we already know where the Sullivan grave is. There's no sporting in that. But it is a grave that has a connection to somebody who's right by the Sullivan grave.
That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Oh yeah, my voice is normally okay during the day. It's just when it comes out like that. Oh yeah, Bob's got a big trip coming up. He's gonna ride the train. I was just telling a friend that I made over in the UK over the course of my trip there. She was complaining about a couple of trains from Leeds to London got canceled due to the weather, so they're cramming like 3 trains worth of people on one train. And I figured, the equivalent to that would be like Chicago to Des Moines, distance-wise. But there are exactly 2 trains that run, and they don't get you to Des Moines, they get you to Osceola, which is 50 miles from Des Moines. So after a ride of either 7 or 12 hours, depending which train you get on, you would then still have to rent a car. You might be able to get a bus from Osceola to Des Moines. It wouldn't be easy, but you could. But then once you get to Des Moines, you still need a car. And sure, they're now more overpriced than they were when they were not privatized, etc. They did cancel on me a couple of times while I was there, but there was always a workaround. There was always another train. Sherry, yes, I have now finished my Manhattan and moved on to Buffalo Trace.
Here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Sucker.
Yeah, it's the thing in the UK, every train I took got me right to where I needed to be. Except when I went to the place that I went to in Liverpool. But that was because I went to a far-flung place in Liverpool. Not right by the train station. But just about everywhere that I went, I could get off the train and get to the venue without too much trouble. Get to my hotel, get to the venue, nothing. Susan, that's no way to get to Bisnamo Beach. Park Avenue and it all over town. You see them shuffling, trucking along. It spread like a forest blaze, became a craze and sang to Harlem now. Everybody's trucking. The beacons on the building to alert planes. They might have said so, but really I think they just put them in there because they were cool more than anything else. You'd see other things from planes anyway. And of course, to find America, you take a left at Greenland. It's not a wrong turn at Albuquerque. Watching that new Beatles 64 documentary made me want to post on YouTube Murray the K's introduction to a Bob Dylan concert about a year later. He comes out before, Forest Hill 65, before the show, he comes out and says, "All right, all of you Dylan fans out there, I first heard of Bob Dylan from a fellow by the name of John Lennon. of the Beatles, who asked for his record about 3 years ago, and now there's this new thing. It's a new thing, it's not rock, it's not folk, it's a new kind of thing called Dylan. There's a swinging new mood in this country, and I think Bob Dylan is at the center of this new mood. It's a new kind of expression, a new kind of telling it like it is, and Bob Dylan is definitely what's happening, baby. And it's a great tape because right after he says that, the crowd just boos him back to the Stone Age, which is exactly what he deserves. The one thing about that new Beatles doc is I don't understand, I still don't get what the deal with Murray the K was, but it's nice to see George saying he too did not get what the deal with Murray the K was. Murray the K, the fifth Beatle, don't get it. Maybe Adam the S now? I've had a lot to drink now. Should really find out who that person was who came into my house. Is that Ronnie? It's too early for her to be back. It's one of my favorite thing in the new Beatles documentary, honestly, is the clip of George saying, "What was the thing with Murray the K exactly?" He just kind of showed up. Well, being loud and obnoxious was just something you were used to if you were from Liverpool. The place where I stayed in Liverpool, Childwell Abbey, John, Paul, and George played there at a wedding reception, George's brother's wedding reception in '58. And at some point in the proceedings, a woman was playing piano, and John came up and poured a drink over her head and said, "I anoint thee, David." And no one thought that this was unusual wedding behavior at the time. It was like, oh, this is Liverpool, that's how we do things. Guys gotta do something to keep warm, right? Actually went inside of the Macy's on 34th Street, the Miracle on 34th Street Macy's, last year. I went right back out of it, but I was there. It's kind of like a little mall in there now.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his
Sounds like the
orchestra and
furnace
Helen
is
Warren
starting.
sing, Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
That's not the noise that it normally makes. Let me go listen to the radiator for a second. I don't know, it sounded like it was moaning low. Kathleen, that is awesome. Could you hear anything? Like, I talk to people who saw them in 65, 66, and they always say, well, you could almost hear what song they were doing. There's a thing going around a while ago, like comparing, you know, when the Beatles toured Australia, the average price of a ticket, if you adjust for inflation, was about $60. Like, compare that to what Taylor Swift charges, but they played for like half an hour in Australia with no sound system, no lighting system, no stage show whatsoever, not even a security routine, which was absurd, but they didn't know that yet. Okay, that's why when I was in Wolverhampton, there was a game on, or a match on, between Wolverhampton and somebody else. Luckily, Wolverhampton won, so the mood around the pub afterwards was light. And I told people I was going to Wolverhampton, they were like, "Are you nuts?" It's kind of like if you told people you were going to stay in Gary, Indiana for a couple of days here. No, I like Wolverhampton just fine, thanks. Just felt like a small college town. Hey, Miles. How you doing, Miles?
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
Yeah, Kathleen, $25. That was a lot. That's more than you would normally have paid for a Beatles show, I would think. Except that Alan Sherman was able to pick up a pair for $47. Of course, my daughter had to go there. The tickets are cheap, she hollered. I was able to pick up a pair for $47. When the Beatles come on the stage, they root and cheer, scream and cheer them. Now I know why they such a rage, it's impossible to hear them. I once saw a description that Alan Sherman, who wrote that song, didn't get as long an obituary as Paul McCartney. And Paul didn't even have to die. Yeah, Miles. Super Miles. For he is Miles, destroyer of laptops. The things on my fireplace, those are Ronnie's nutcrackers. She loves nutcrackers. She's going down to the Disney World for Christmas and bringing a lot of Christmas decorations for her hotel room, which I appreciate to no end. Miles. Okay. It's okay. I'm sorry Lily's so mean to you. Lily doesn't like Miles. She'll tolerate being on a bed at the same time as Priya is on the same bed. But Miles, she'll start hissing at. Still. Alright, I will show you guys what happened. Now, because of these tours, Miles associates me being on the computer or in this corner of the room with getting petted. So every time I sit at my desk, he wants to climb all over the desk and expects to get a lot of attention. On top of my desk was this very large frame featuring a signed photo of Sally Rand that Layla found in an antique store. So while Miles was up there begging for attention, he knocked this very heavy frame down right onto my laptop. The corner hit the screen, this part hit the keyboard, and the laptop was destroyed. Karen, Ronnie is in fact in school, but remotely most of the time. And it was way out of warranty by then. I didn't realize how old that thing was. I thought I got it like a year or so ago. No, I got it like 3 years ago.
We have been presenting the music of Benny Goodman
okay,
and
Miles.
from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
Yeah, this was covered on the Patreon recently. It is from Sally Rand's stint at Mangum's Chateau, which says, Miss Sally Rand, Miss Rand will be delighted to autograph this photograph for you between shows. Also with a lot of signatures of people I can't identify, who I guess were just also present that night, when Sally Rand signed this to Elaine. And the frame itself was probably worth what they were charging for it, which was not much. But all right. So yeah, light as a feather, my ass. Isn't that right, Miles? But all right, everybody. That's me wrapping up. Thanks a lot for those of you who are still putting in donations for these things. These things really do help convince me to keep these things going all the time. Once again, next week there will not be a tour because I will be getting back from Oklahoma and probably not in time to run a tour. And to make up for the fact that we're doing, that I won't be on the kind of as regularly as normal next week, tomorrow morning is going to be a really cool Find a Grave. Then we got a pretty cool Saturday morning mini tour as well. So, all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling all of you to stay safe, stay strong, and of course, if you can. Miles, what do I tell him? That's right, stay spooky, everybody. Have a good night. And be yourself, as Bob says. Unless you're that one right-winger troll who comes on in the morning sometimes. If you're her, find somebody else to be.